Hi there. In today's video, we're back discussing sequencing. In my first video on sequencing, 10 beginner sequences to make you sound like you know what you're doing, we discussed how sequences can help us to develop technique on our instruments and familiarity with different key centers. Well, in today's video, we'll be expanding on those sequences by incorporating more scale types, more varied lengths of phrases, and using some other slightly more advanced harmonic and rhythmic concepts. So without further ado, here's 12 intermediate phrases to make you sound like a pro. Today we'll be learning 6 ascending and 6 descending sequences paired off together. We'll be using a variety of scale types, so we'll continue to use our major scale, but we'll also have some sequences incorporating melodic minor, harmonic minor, and even the symmetric diminished scale for some of our sequences. Some of these sequences will use some different kinds of non-diatonic tones and are of a mixture of different lengths, including some with odd groupings of notes in order to have some interesting rhythmic effects. By the way, if you're interested in the materials you see in today's video, you can purchase the PDF on my website. The link is in the description below. Thanks. Our first 2 sequences today make use of the melodic minor scale. I do really quickly want to mention, for those of you that might come from a more classical background, that when a jazz musician refers to the melodic minor scale, they are pretty much universally referring to what you might know as the ascending melodic minor scale, which they would also use descending. For jazz musicians, this is really the form that is the most important and applicable in terms of melodic and harmonic usage. This sequence begins with an arpeggio of the diatonic 7th chord, so 1, 3, 5, 7, and then it's going to scale down 6, 5, 4, 3 to the next 2, which is now 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. On the way down, we'll be doing the opposite, so it's pretty much an inversion. So we'll be starting on the 7, 7, 5, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, new 2. This sequence is a great one for building familiarity with a scale that you might not know super well just yet, and also has some really nice voice leading suggestions. I like the way that it leads from one to the next. Our next pair of sequences are back using our major scale, but we'll be incorporating a kind of non-diatonic tone, or in this case, what we're calling a lower chromatic approach tone, or LCAT for short. That might sound like a mouthful, but all a lower chromatic approach tone is a note a half step below our next note, our target note. So in this case, if I'm approaching the note C, then our lower chromatic approach tone is B. Likewise, if I'm approaching the note D, then my lower chromatic approach is C sharp. You'll notice that sometimes our lower chromatic approach tone will be a diatonic note, like the B was in our C major scale. But that C sharp leading to the D does not belong to our C major scale. So sometimes it will be chromatic tones and sometimes it will be diatonic tones. And the way this sequence goes is lower chromatic approach, 1, 3, 5, lower chromatic approach, 1, 3, 5. On the way back down, we'll be doing essentially the opposite, where it's lower chromatic approach tone to our 5, 3, 1. The reason descending, I chose to use lower chromatic approaches still instead of then using upper chromatic approach, is that upper chromatic approaches tend to sound quite dissonant, at least to my ears, but I think you might agree with me. This next duo of sequences might seem deceptively simple at first, but has some really interesting rhythmic assertions associated with it. You'll see harmonically all we're doing is we're arpeggiating the second inversion triads of our major scale. So that is to say starting on the fifth of each of these triads. So 1, 4, 6 is really an F major triad in second inversion. Doing that ascending. And on the way back down, we'll just be doing the opposite of that, starting on the 6, 4, 1. Where this sequence gets interesting is in the rhythmic suggestions it holds, as it creates what we call a hemiola effect. A hemiola is when we suggest a different time signature on top of our existing time signature. So if we're in 4/4 time, you'll see that because this is 3-note groupings of eighth notes, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it kind of suggests 6/8 time on top of our 4/4. And the effect that has, just to illustrate, 1, 2, 3, 4, is that it constantly displaces itself in the phrase each time it's played. This is a really important concept in bebop improvisation and composition. If you look at the improvisations and melodies of people like Charlie Parker or Thelonious Monk or Sonny Rollins, you'll often see that they're using either a hemiola effect or some kind of displacing effect in order to make their melodies more interesting. Like if you take the melody Straight No Chaser, you see that what he's doing is taking that phrase and constantly displacing it by a beat or sometimes a half a beat. And this leads to a lot more interesting rhythm and melodic associations. This next duo of sequences is in harmonic minor, and we'll be using a couple of the concepts that we discussed in some of the earlier sequences. First of all, it is again a hemiola effect, but this time it's a 6-note grouping. So if we're in 4/4 time, it would be like we're suggesting 3/4 time on top of our existing 4/4. We'll also be using another kind of non-diatonic tone, in this case what we call a lower chromatic neighboring tone. All a lower chromatic neighboring tone is when we start on a note and then we go down a half step to the note just below it and then immediately return to that first tone. So in this case our sequence is 1, lower chromatic neighboring tone 1, 2, 3, 5. On the way back down, we'll be again basically reversing the order of notes, so it'll be 5, lower chromatic neighboring tone 5, 3, 2, 1. This is also a great sequence for building familiarity with a scale you might not already know too well. In this case, I'm hoping that it will allow you to get a feel for and hear the notes of our harmonic minor scale a little better and understand the intervallic relationships in that scale. Our last two pairs of sequences are going to be making use of what we know as the symmetric diminished scale, or what classical musicians might refer to as an octatonic scale. What makes a scale symmetric is that it's based on some pattern of repeating intervals. So for instance, the whole tone scale, which is made entirely of whole steps, is a symmetric scale. We also have what's called the augmented scale, which is made up of minor thirds and half steps. And also the chromatic scale is a symmetric scale, as it's made entirely of half steps. Our symmetric diminished scale is made up of half steps and whole steps. So we can have two different forms of this, one where it starts with the half step and then the whole step. This form is more often used by jazz musicians over dominant chords. We also have the opposite form where we start with the whole step and then the half step. That form is used more often over diminished chords. What's really interesting about symmetric scales is because they're made up of patterns, that there is a limited number of symmetric scales that are unique. So for instance, if we play our C half whole diminished scale, that includes the same notes as our E flat half whole diminished scale, our G flat half whole diminished scale, and our A half whole diminished scale. So it's really nice because when we're practicing, since each scale covers 4 different scales, we only really have to learn 3. This also means it makes for interesting sequences and patterns, as we can repeat things at minor thirds with the exact same intervals. This first symmetric diminished sequence begins with a whole step, followed by a major third, and then another whole step, all ascending. Then we repeat that a minor third higher. On the way back down, it's pretty much the same thing, just everything descending instead of ascending. In its descending form, this is a sequence that you can hear John Coltrane playing a lot of on the song I Love You. This is also a great one to get a feel for the diminished scale and to understand how you can use it, especially over dominant seventh chords. This next pair of diminished scale sequences and our last two sequences for this video begin with a half step ascending, followed by a minor third and a perfect fourth. What I like about this is you can see that major triad in there that then is approached, that has that same lower chromatic approach tone to the third of that triad. We then repeat that up a minor third, and again, and so forth. On the way back down, we'll again be doing a lower chromatic approach tone to the third of that major triad, right? So that's going to be a half step up, major third down, perfect fourth down, then repeat down a minor third, and so forth. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in developing on the sequences in today's video, keep in mind that most of them you can practice with just about any scale type, right? Most of these you can practice in harmonic minor, melodic minor, major, or even harmonic major, which is another scale type that I hope to get to in another video. Also, if you're interested in getting the materials from this video, the PDF is available for purchase on my website. The link is in the description below. Also, while you're there, if you're interested in private lessons, there is a contact form on the website, as well as some other materials from my other videos on jazz improvisation. Thank you so much, and happy practicing.